Hey, deserving listeners, this is part 2 in which I react to an interview on the Just Trish podcast in which Trisha Paytas interviews her husband, Moses. Let's watch some more of this.
You have to let that go because otherwise they just recruited you basically, you know.
What if they let that go? Like, okay, I forgive my enemies. And they're like, damn, no one loves me still. I'm still alone in this life.
But that's a different story, right? So now, you know, what is for you to, I think when somebody finds love, self-love and love in the world, they don't feel alone anymore. Because anyway, I think walking into a relationship, you should feel whole and complete, you know.
Yeah, and then there's that idea. Yeah, he's just a product of all of those talking points. He is parroting all those ideas. And again, it just depends on what he means by it. But I've just heard it so many times in a destructive context that it'll annoy me such that I will pause it and talk, which is that this idea that before you can have a healthy relationship with someone, a successful relationship with someone, you need to be whole. What does that mean? You need to love yourself. Again, what does that mean? Often what they mean practically is that if you still have residual feelings about the past, if you're occasionally dreaming about a former partner, or when you see a car that might be them, you feel that feeling of pain in your heart of like, oh, and that feeling is you dwelling on it, or you're not facing it or something. And, you know, that might be the case. But I know very, very healthy people who live very happy lives. They went out with someone for 3 years, 20 years ago, and it was a very intense relationship. And when they scroll past their former partner on Instagram, they get a jolt of longing to be with them, but then they very quickly will say, no, I don't want to be with, I like my current partner. You know, we have those emotions. Typically, culturally, I'm guessing he would look at that person and say, you've got unresolved issues, you need to deal with that, or you should never have been involved with your current partner before you should have resolved that. Case by case. Might that indicate that? Maybe. But this notion of just being clean, it's almost like a cleanliness or an anti-clutter, anti-dirt. And it's also paternalistic because it's anti-emotion in my view. It's this notion that somehow you can just control your emotions and move on when emotions are emotions. You don't have any control over it, and why would you want to? And what's this notion of being whole? Now, again, if he were to explain, maybe I'd be completely on board with it, but there's just a lot of phrases that he's using that are typically associated with a lot of annoying things. And Trisha's asking some good questions. You know, she's clarifying, and it almost appears that she is not fully on board. She's valuing him, and she's not arguing with him, and she talks as though she very much likes him and respects him and thinks that he's very smart. But I don't really hear her like completely believing or adhering to everything that he's saying.
You shouldn't be in a relationship because you're alone.
But I think I disagree with you there because I do feel like I was such a shell of a person, and then like once we fell in love, and like I saw how much you loved me. Right.
So I'm curious what he'll say to this. This is my point of view. This is my experience that when we have, I'm not going to say wholeness or not being whole. I'm going to talk about when people feel sad and they long for closeness and they experience depression and anxiety and other kinds of effects when they're lonely, and they will be triggered to be reminded of past traumas and pains and losses, and then they go through a lot of therapy enough so that they have some self-awareness, some recovery, but they're not done with that yet. Whoever is really, especially on a certain level, they meet someone, and that relationship, if engineered right and there's enough compatibility, that can be very corrective and very therapeutic, very healthy, very balancing to that individual, such that once entering into the relationship, emotionally, they're a lot better off. So I'm curious what he'll say to this.
Try and like get my life together. I feel like I was like completely shattered when we
right, but
were dating.
That's what I was talking about. Like when love talks to the love in the other person, then that love starts to take over, right? So it's not it happened from this direction. But if it happened from your direction, it'd be the same outcome of you taking out whatever you felt that was not good or not you, that you didn't want to have in yourself.
I'm lost. She's understanding, and God bless, it's their marriage. As far as I know, he doesn't have any like followers. Like, he's not a guru. He just is talking about his own ideas and his own way of seeing the world, and that's fantastic. And like I said, 90+% of everything that he's saying I can get behind. So I don't know why I'm being a dick about it.
And finding yourself, and then again, love would appear. It would be the same thing.
I just wish there was like some really great advice to give people, because like for me, I was just so desperate and so lonely and so miserable before I found you. And I just like wish there was like better advice. I feel like you're the person to give it to someone who like is just struggling, who thinks there's like no end.
There's no good advice because there's no universal solution to that. And everyone's different. And some people do everything right and a lot of bad things happen. So there's no saying or proverb that you can follow to somehow fix all that. I mean, maybe the only thing that I would say would be that depending on the situation, of course, everyone deserves to have self-awareness and corrective experiences. That's very general, whether it be through therapy and or through other relationships. And however you can manage that, then that's often what can result in greater happiness and greater fulfillment and more resilience and happiness. So, but what does that mean? Practically, what it means is that you have an opportunity to get to know your schemas and your triggers and how you are shooting yourself in the foot sometimes, your defenses, and where they come from. And that can help. Knowledge is power, and you can, in the moment, refrain from engaging in a typical pattern that can be self-destructive or harmful, and avoid triggers that can make you feel a particular way. I'm applying this to every human being on the planet, so it's hard to generalize. And then the other part is that we can all benefit by having corrective emotional experiences that often involve attachments with others, secure attachments. By cultivating that, we can feel better about ourselves. We can learn to trust other people, and it just sort of cascades on itself and fulfills a lot of our needs and is biologically regulating. Those are facts. I'm not just pulling that out of my ass. That's when we study people in secure relationships, whether they're just generally in a secure relationship, we pull them out of their life and we measure their various different biological markers, and we also test them psychologically. Or if we study people in the lab as a couple, and when they are not fighting and they're getting along, as opposed to when they are fighting, we see a lot of markers of health and of psychological wellness. So I'm not just saying that. Those are empirically found to be demonstratable.
Insight for them to find love that they're searching for.
Yeah, but I don't think I did that for you. I think you did that. So it's like, I think that's...
Well, I think divine intervention or whatever. I think it just happened, but like maybe...
Right. So he says, well, according to the way I see the world, which is fine, her happiness is not because of him. It's because she found the happiness. But I don't think that's the way she sees it, and it's not the way I see it. The way I see it is that through secure, loving relationships that we're treated well, and we are shown that we're worthy of dedication and loyalty and love and care and attunement, we feel good about ourselves. I'm guessing he holds the very, very common cultural notion that your self-esteem is dependent on your own choices that you make in your mind. But if that were true, then no one would have low self-esteem, right? If it just is your own choice of thought, no one wants to choose to hate themselves, right? I mean, maybe there are occasional individuals that kind of want to do that as an option, but certainly no one wants to perpetually hate themselves. And we see, this is just science to me, that you look at people with low self-esteem and you look at their history, and they have a lot of people that treat them like shit and say a lot of horrible things about them. Okay. You look at people with good self-esteem and you see a lifetime of them being generally treated well and people saying a lot of nice things to them and minimal negative things about them. And then when you see someone with low self-esteem become higher self-esteem, what do you see? you see maybe some internal choices regarding cognitions and automatic thoughts that they engage in, certain patterns of thought that they have. But what you also see is a lot of corrective experiences where they're shown that they matter and that they can depend on others and that they are worthy of love and worthy of being praised. That's what you see. What you don't see is someone with low self-esteem who goes on a mission to just convince themselves that they are worthy without having the corrective experiences. What we don't see is significant gains in self-esteem.
For you.
Right.
So I think that's what it is. Like
maybe, yeah, I guess thinking about that as just being more open to people.
Now, I don't know anything about Trisha. Maybe she has a problem with being overly dependent on others and doesn't engage in enough personal, internal, and external choices to help herself. Yeah, that could be. There are syndromes and issues like that, but I still wouldn't describe it as being outside of what I was saying earlier.
But there was one about, there's favorite moments together and dating someone with mental illness. And these are both really great ones. Oh, man. All right, we'll go with the... Because there's a beautiful clip already of you. We did a whole deep dive on dating someone with mental illness. Am I the first person you dated that was mentally ill? That you knew of?
Probably not. I mean,
I don't know what mental illness she suffers from. I'm trying to remember if that was disclosed during the videos that I watched in the past.
And it was me like not wanting to feel like trigger or something. I don't want to talk about it, but then you'd be like, that's controlling the conversation or whatever. But I was like, oh, but it's like, what? This is such an interesting...
Right, because I'm able to just sit down and talk forever about something and not get, not get triggered.
Right.
And for you, like at some point, you just knew, okay, I need to stop here and come back to it later.
Because we saw what happens when it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
And...
So then I was like, wait, but that's not fair. I want to talk about it now. Like I want to result. Like what?
All right, so we're in the third hour, and they are talking about their relationship, and she asked about mental illness. And he talked about how he doesn't take things personally. He now doesn't. In the past, he says that he used to. Again, I don't know what they're referring to about mental illness because it sounds like now they're talking about her being triggered because of attachment insecurity. I'm not sure. People use the term mental illness for a lot of different things, even for personality disorders, but some people don't. Anyway, from the sound of it and from my vague memory of what she has disclosed regarding her emotional issues, it sounds like they will be in a fight-ish, and he is saying he stays more regulated according to him, and she will have more variance. And he says that when she gets upset at him, when triggered, he doesn't take it personally. And that is wonderful. That is wonderful. If someone can do that, which is hard to do, it can really, well, I'll say we could all benefit by choosing what we take personally and what we don't, and being able to give our partners grace when triggered, even when they are hurting our feelings and being hurtful to us through rejection or through mean behavior. Of course, none of us should put up with abuse or harmful behavior, but in a long-term relationship with anyone, a friend, even a coworker, it's going to happen. You're going to trigger that person, and they're going to lash out in some way, whether it's more overt or more subtle, like they pull away. And if you can try not to take it personally and see it as their behavior, the way that he says that he does, then that can facilitate a retention of that relationship and of health. It doesn't mean you just forego your needs. It just means that you recognize what's happening. You're saying, okay, well, they must be triggered, and now they're treating me poorly. It's not because I deserve to be treated poorly. This doesn't feel great, but it's not an indication of something inherent in me or in this relationship. That person's triggered. I did something inadvertent. I don't even necessarily know what I did, but something happened, and I'm not going to go down a road in my mind of interpreting this as somehow inherent to me or this relationship. Then you get through that period of time because that helps you to cope and stay in contact. Then afterwards, you could certainly assert and say, hey, I don't appreciate the way you treated me. Not taking it personally doesn't mean just letting things go. It just means, having things in perspective. So if he does that, that's great. And if you have someone, from what I understand about Trisha, her issues, she talked about being abandoned by her dad and having a lot of insecurities and going down a lot of rabbit holes and having triggers. And so for someone like her, it can be a very corrective experience to be with someone like him, even if he is on the avoidant attachment side, maybe the somewhat narcissistic side of things, as long as it's not to a certain degree. It absolutely can enhance each other, because she can be enhanced by his stability and his self-assuredness, and also I think a lot of skills that he has. I think he has developed a lot of skills through his life, mentally and relationship-wise, that can stabilize, when she goes on the attack after being triggered, he is less likely to have a severe reaction to that, whether moving away or aggressively towards her. And that can be very reassuring to her and can be very corrective for her and can be very balancing for the relationship. He can be enhanced by her being more emotional and more solicitous of closeness and contact. Because if he was with someone like him, they might just never be in contact, because he's at least from the interviews, fairly intellectual. So there might be a complementary relationship. Of course, those differences can spin out of control and cause a lot of problems, but if managed, can enhance the relationship.
Are you stopping? Are you not wanting to talk about it because you think I'm right, or you think you're wrong, or you think you're right, or you think I'm
right? You're just trying to end a conversation.
Yeah, trying to control the conversation, and so it's not about control. It's about you actually was trying to self-control you.
I think it's tough to date someone with mental illness. I think as someone who does, I could never date someone who had something similar to me. I mean, even though I could understand
it would trigger each other.
Right. She's talking about what I think I was talking about, which is that she needs someone like him. And I would hope that the two of them would see that he needs someone like her, because if they frame it as she's the broken one and he's the healthy one, then that doesn't usually work out very well.
That's what I'm saying, to step aside and try to look at what's actually happening. And then when things calm down, you'll find the truth, right? The dust will settle, and then you'll find out how that person really feels. They feel horrible about what they said. They didn't mean what they say. Something else happened that triggered them, and then you can decide to yourself, okay, can I live in a relationship knowing these are the triggers, and
this is all fantastic, actually. I'm really pleased with what he's saying here. I wasn't resonating with other things he was saying, but this is actually, in my way of thinking, quite sophisticated and detailed and understanding. Even the language he's using around triggering and around the phases of it, right? He's not just having a simplistic statement of just let it go, stop hating, live in love. He's being detailed. The way I was describing it earlier, he's basically describing that in his own words here, which is really great. And that'll help any relationship, and I think particularly a relationship with Trisha. And maybe this is a really good beginning and foundation for the two of them.
I could easily always trigger you, and then you'll feel bad for being basically control you through the anger, right? Because when somebody's angry at you, you win. If you make somebody angry, you won. So again, I think it's really important to watch and see somebody pushing your triggers to make you angry and trying to control you. Is somebody getting angry, they have triggers, and you're not willing to,
All right, I'm not on board with that. It depends on what he means by anger, but anger is very important and very useful, just like happiness and just like noticing heat. Sometimes you need to know if something's too hot to touch, right? And it is important to understand temperature. It's important to understand anger. Anger is provoked when we perceive an injustice happening to us or someone else, someone we care about, or even someone we don't even know. If you see an animal being mistreated, you can be provoked to feel very angry. And that anger motivates us to right the wrong, to say, hey, you can't do that to me, or hey, you can't do that to that person. Now, what do we do with the anger? That's what we should be careful about, right? But the feeling of anger is very, very healthy, very, very necessary for life and happiness and fairness. So this notion of never be angry, again, it depends on what maybe he would frame the way I'm describing anger as just a decision that you make or something. But in terms of how we measure emotion and how we understand it, I'm describing it in that way. You know, it's the same feeling. It'll evoke the same biological markers, not always, but, you know, it's, anyway. I imagine what he really means is that you shouldn't be vindictive and harmful or vengeful or abusive or hurtful or something. You know, people often equate emotion with behavior, but emotions are not behavior. Emotions are emotions. Emotions carry with them an urge for behavior, usually, right? But emotions are not behavior. Emotions are emotions. Behavior is behavior. They're related, but they're not the same. Okay, just chiming in here. The rest of this video is just going to be for members of the YouTube channel. So if you want to see this full episode, become a member. Otherwise, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.